So welcome everybody. And this is, this is the first day of 2022. It started out in a pretty interesting way for me, I must say. I won't even go into the details. But this is the first of a series of classes that will be happening on Saturday nights, sponsored by Thupten Norbuling, on various of the books that they're considered by people who organize this sort of thing central, Heart Lama books. So we'll be looking at books by Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama over the course of the year. So I agreed to teach the first 3 months, then take a month off, which is April, and then do 6 more books. So I have them all calendared, but I can't remember what they all are right now. Now, my conception of how I'd like to do this class is not as a lecture class. I'd like to have this as a kind of a discussion. In college, they used to call this sort of thing a seminar, but that's kind of a fancy name. I don't think we're going to do a seminar, but I certainly would like to do a discussion. If you are reading the books, that's great. That's not essential. What I will do each week is I will have a selection of a selection of the book, which I will make available as a screen share so that we can talk about it. And I will kind of riff on it a bit. But what would be really great is anytime that you have a question or would like to make a comment, or you think I completely screwed up and got it all wrong and you have a different interpretation, which is much better, or perhaps you heard a Lama say something someplace that you would like to contribute, or whatever the case may be, raise your hand and I will try to be paying attention to the hand raising function here. I will endeavor to stop and ask you what's on your mind. Now, for all of this to work, as far as I can tell from my experience in using Zoom, is for one thing, it's considered bad form for people to have their mics unmuted. But sometimes, we need to do that. Certainly, if I'm rambling on and I haven't asked you what your question is or something like that, please go ahead and interrupt me. So I won't consider that bad form. I have a habit of trying to keep track of what I'm talking about. And if I stop, I might forget what I'm talking about, and then I'll never get back there again. I don't know if that's one of the benefits of being elder or not. I have a friend whose wife, unfortunately, has Alzheimer's, and every day she wakes up and she thinks, wow, this is the first day, or something like that. And she doesn't worry about anything because I'll take care of it tomorrow. But tomorrow literally never comes for her. Everything was always today. So she totally lives in today. So she's very relaxed about her life. It drives her husband a little bit crazy because he has to do everything and try to remember what she's forgotten to do. I guess that's not really a benefit of being old. I don't know why I'm saying that. Never mind. All right. So, hello, Victor. So, I guess those are sort of the ground rules. Just one other thing. It would be really great if you would be willing to turn on your video camera so that I can see who's here. Certainly, it will help from the point of view of hand raising. If you don't want to do that for some particular reason, that's okay. I'm not going to insist upon it. This isn't Buddhist philosophy 101 at Portland State University, so I don't have that sort of, I teach there. So in those situations, I can say, this is the way we're going to do it. So please do it, or just do it. Can't do that, won't do that, don't want to do that. All right, so let's begin with the selection that I picked for today to start with. And what I would really appreciate would be a volunteer who would be willing to read it. It's a page and a quarter. If no one volunteers to read it, I will. But an hour ago, I was doing Pandan Lama praises at the top of my voice. And I don't know how much voice I'm going to have left. So it would be better if somebody else would do it. So Louis, you'll do that? Thank you. I really appreciate it. Let me do the screen share here. And so you can see what it is you need to read, which would certainly help. Oh, here we are. Here's the screen share. You'd think I could find that pretty easily these days. All right, here we go. So this you'll see is, that's interesting. There's a second page here. Let me see what's going on. Driving us to, well, maybe everything fit onto one page here. It did. All right, well, that's really very convenient. So Louis, if you would read this, if everybody else would either listen or take a look at this, and this is what we're going to be talking about. I should say before we get started that the reason that I picked this particular passage out of the book, Making Your Life Meaningful, which is what we're talking, which is the book for the week, for the month. I never even mentioned that, right? Clever of me. The reason I picked this, which is on page 64 of the book, is because it's a good segue to the 5 classes I did on psychology of Buddhist Tantra. So that'll carry us into this. And it'll actually segue into the next 3 months. Okay, so Louis, if you would, please.
The visualization, the visualization and the absolute guru. When you visualize Guru Shakyamuni Buddha, visualize Avalokitesvara at his heart. The psychology of this was explained by the great yogi Sangye Yeshe, who said, without the guru, there is no Buddha, which means that all Buddhas come from the guru. At the heart of the explanation of Guru Yoga lies the Dharmakaya. In general, we can call this omniscient mind, but to be specific, we should call it the extremely subtle mind of the wisdom of great bliss, non-dual with the emptiness of all existence. Non-dual means the wisdom that sees the emptiness of all existence directly, not from afar, like when we look at distant things, but through having thoroughly pervaded all phenomena, the wisdom of great bliss, seeing all emptiness directly and non-dualistically, like water mixed with water, through having completely eradicated the dualistic view. This is Dharmakaya. This is what is called the absolute guru. When we talk about the guru, we can refer to either the absolute or the conventional guru. But even if the absolute guru manifested right now in the aspect of the Buddha, we wouldn't be able to see him because our minds are obscured. Therefore, the only way in which the absolute guru can communicate with us is by manifesting in an ordinary human body, a form with samsaric suffering, delusions, and mistaken actions. It is only by taking this imperfect form that the absolute guru can communicate with us, manifesting in an ordinary, mistaken aspect according to our impure, obscured, mistaken mind. This ordinary aspect is all we can see with our present state of mind. Thus, the only way the absolute guru can guide us, especially when it comes to giving teachings, is through this ordinary, mistaken human form. We don't have the karma to see an aspect purer than this. Even if the guru were to manifest in a pure form, he couldn't see it. On the other hand, if the absolute guru manifested in a lower form, like that of an animal, that too would be difficult for us to recognize. It would also be hard to communicate through such a form, give teachings and so forth. Therefore, this ordinary aspect, which shows delusion and suffering, is very precious, very important. Because it is through manifesting in this form that all the Buddhas guide us. Therefore, we refer to the person who teaches the alphabet, who gives oral transmissions of and commentaries on the sutras, and who gives initiations and explanations, commentaries and meditation instructions on Tantra, freeing us from all samsaric suffering and obscurations, and leading us to enlightenment in these various ways as the conventional guru. This is the Dharmakaya, the absolute guru, guiding us to enlightenment by revealing the entire path through the ordinary mistaken form we call the conventional guru. This happens not so much because of the omniscient mind and perfect power of the absolute guru, the Dharmakaya, the transcendent wisdom of non-dual bliss and void, but because the absolute guru is bound by infinite compassion that encompasses us and all other sentient beings without a single exception. This infinite compassion compels the Dharmakaya to manifest in numberless different forms according to the minds of sentient beings, leading us to enlightenment gradually, from life to life, from happiness to happiness. Therefore, whenever we say Guru Shakyamuni Buddha, we should remember that Guru refers to the absolute Guru who guides us by manifesting in the ordinary form of the conventional Guru. Guru Shakyamuni Buddha is the absolute Guru manifesting as Shakyamuni Buddha to guide us to enlightenment. Therefore, Guru Shakyamuni Buddha implies the oneness of the absolute and conventional gurus, and the mind that sees this oneness is the mind of Guru Yoga. Previously, you saw the Buddha and the Guru as separate. That mind was not the Guru Yoga mind. When you see them with devotion as one, you have transformed your mind into the Guru Yoga mind.
Okay, you should be able to hear me now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. Somebody muted me, which is probably a good idea. So, oh, by the way, hello, Colin. Nice to see you. So I could probably, or we could probably talk about this passage for the next 5 weeks, tonight and the whole rest of the month of January, because there's so much that's packed into here. I don't think we'll do that, but this is kind of a very encompassing passage. So I said that I saw this passage as a segue between what I taught on Psychology of Buddhist Tantra. And if it's not clear to you how that is, then let's go back to the very first paragraph, where Lama Zopa says, in general, we can call this omniscient mind, but to be specific, we should call it the extremely subtle mind of the wisdom of great bliss, non-dual with the emptiness of existence. So that's sort of the main theme that I had when I was talking about the psychology of Tantra. I was talking about 3 states of consciousness: waking state, dreaming state, and deep sleep state, as being similitudes of the 3 bodies of a Buddha and the 3 periods of time, 3 bodies of the Buddha, which you may know as the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and the Nirmanakaya. And when Lama Zopa here is talking about the necessity to see the guru, the conventional teacher, he is talking about the Nirmanakaya form, which is the waking state form, to use that kind of language. But when he's talking about the omniscient mind, the Dharmakaya, he's talking about a mind that can be understood as being similar to dreamless sleep mind, a mind of unity. And that's why he's talking about things being as one. Okay, so that's the place of connection here. Now, why am I starting with Guru Yoga and with this connection? Well, everything that we come to understand about Buddhism and about Buddhist practice comes to us in the form of some sort of teaching, right? I mean, it's not like we're all going to go out and sit under a tree and we're going to figure it out for ourselves. Shakyamuni Buddha sort of did that, but in fact, he had a number of teachers. We know that. After I mean, this is perhaps mythological, but after he left the palace and renounced, sent his horse back, cut his hair off, went off in the forest as a renunciate, he studied with various teachers in the forest. We don't know much of anything about them, but they taught him many important techniques. So even Shakyamuni Buddha had gurus. And then he went beyond his gurus because he was an extraordinary yogi. But for us, everything we learn from our gurus. We learn either in the form of a text, like the text we're looking at, or in person when we're with somebody. And in fact, sometimes a combination of the two seems to be what's most effective. In my own experience, and these days I pretty much only talk from my own experience, because to talk like I actually know something in general, rather than know something from my own experience, is unbelievably arrogant. I don't know a lot of things at all, certainly nothing in total general. But anyway, from my own experience, there are many things that I learned at a certain level from studying texts. But there were many cases when hearing the same thing in the presence of a teacher made the meaning come forth. That at some superficial level, there was meaning from studying the text, and that was important. It oriented me, it oriented my mind. But the real understanding sometimes only came when I was in the presence of a really qualified Lama or Guru. Tibetan is Lama for Guru. In the presence of a really qualified Lama who would say the same thing. And there was something that was, I guess I would say, transmitted, something that was conveyed by being in the presence of such a teacher. And meanings that were implicit in texts that I had been reading, some suddenly became explicit, and I understood things. And I could walk away with understanding things that I hadn't understood before. So in this passage that we're reading, really what Lama Zopa is saying is that when you're in the presence of a qualified guru, there are two things that are going on. One is there is this ordinary appearing person that's in front of you, right? Who may walk with a limp or stutter or scratch his head in ways that you might think are a little bit inappropriate for somebody doing a Dharma talk. And that's the ordinary guru that Lama Zopa is talking about. But the ordinary guru, from this point of view, the way he's describing it, is kind of a manifestation of the omniscient mind, which he's calling the absolute guru, the Dharmakaya, which takes the form of the Lama in order to teach us. Now, that's perhaps a little bit on the metaphysical side. It may sound like a little hard to accept, like, oh, well, the omniscient mind of absolute reality is taking the form of a guru in order to benefit us. I mean, if you're a Christian, that's got to sound a little bit like Jesus Christ showing up. if you think about it, because that's the only way that salvation can occur, is for God to appear in human form. And there could be similarities here. I don't know. I mean, there are some people that think that Jesus spent time in India and learned some things there. I have no idea if that's true or not. But you can set that aside and you can look at this whole question in a much more practical way, which is to say that great lamas are great teachers because they engaged in the practices which transform their minds from the ordinary minds that people like you and I have into extraordinary minds. Omniscient minds, I don't know. But extraordinary minds of great attainment and extraordinary experience. And then they can teach from that level of experience and bring a special level of understanding into the ordinary words that you might run into in the text or that you would hear me speaking. So in that sense, if you kind of turn the whole thing around, you can see that these teachers are very important because of the way they've developed themselves. And that development is what allows them to teach with insight and with power so that the words have real meaning rather than just some sort of superficial meaning. That's just another way, sort of an inverse way of understanding what Lama Zopa is talking about here. Now, this leads to some interesting problems. Louis, I see that your hand is up. I'm sorry it took so long to call on you. What's up?
You were talking about the difference between reading a text and being in the Lama's presence. And there's a sort of an attenuated understanding you get from being in the physical presence of the Lama. Does that attenuation carry over onto a Zoom link?
Boy, that's a really interesting question. In general, I don't know how to answer that. But I guess the way I'll answer that is by sort of sharing an experience that I had. Let me sort of shift the little images that I'm looking at here so that I can see you. And probably you should click whatever makes your raised hand go away. I was sort of dubious about the possibility of initiations being offered over the internet. I thought, how is that possible? I mean, you have to be in the presence of a teacher to receive the transmission for a certain meditation practice. And for myself, I couldn't see how it could be done over the internet. That seemed strange to me. I suppose if you and the Lama were telepathic, that would be different. And maybe that gets to an experience that I had that sort of turned my thinking around on this particular issue, which was, and I've told this story before, so I know some of you have heard it, but some of you have not. So I'll tell it again. At one point, a year or so ago, His Holiness the Dalai Lama was going to do an Avalokiteshvara initiation from Dharmasala. And it was a 2-day event. And I thought, well, that's fairly ridiculous. I don't believe that this is really something that can work. It's really possible. And so I didn't attend the first night. And then the second night I did attend because I thought, well, this is kind of dumb if you did. I mean, it's the Dalai Lama. You've met him many times. You have a sort of personal relationship with him. You've taken many teachings from him, many initiations. Just tune in on Zoom and see what's going on and see what he looks like, how's his health these days, and this kind of stuff. So that was the night he was doing the Avalokiteshvara initiation. And so I just sort of tuned into that and I sort of opened myself up and I thought, well, let's see what's happening here. And wham, kablooey, I got it. I got high. I don't know how else to explain it. I absolutely received the energetic force of the initiation process from him. It completely blew me away. It literally knocked me over. And I thought, well, that's just a great teaching about a couple of things, David, of which the first is your extraordinary arrogance and stupidity. But the second is that these things can happen. But when I thought more about it, I thought, well, can this happen for everybody? Or does this only happen if you've already got a pre-existing relationship with the teacher? Now, I don't really know the answer to that particular question. There is a teacher in Arizona by the name of Gar Rinpoche, who is in the Kagyu lineage. And he's been doing initiations over the internet. But what he's been telling people is that they can attend and that the initiation will work for them as long as they have met him at some point, that the connection has been made. And if the connection has been made, then the initiation is going to work. So that seems to be his view. And he is a Rinpoche. He's a very fine Lama, very extraordinary. So maybe it answers your question. Now, I'll crank it one notch beyond this, though. The Dalai Lama, in any case, is not your typical Lama, might be one way to phrase it. And when he is vowing to help all sentient beings, that includes you and me, even if he's not met you and me. So how is that possible? So here's my thought on this subject. He's advanced enough as a bodhisattva that I have the feeling that he can find the place in himself as a human being, which is identical with the place in you and me as a human being. That he can find a place where we're all connected. Everybody on the planet is connected. And that he can reach into that place with the energy of his blessing. And if I'm correct about that, then when he gave the Avalokiteshvara initiation to people all over the planet who'd never been in his presence, they got it. And so did the birds and the squirrels and everybody else on the planet, because he was thinking of all of them, all at the same time, because he could reach into the place where everybody exists somehow in the same place because they're somehow the same. Can every Lama do that? Boy, that's beyond me to answer that question. That would be a matter of my saying that I know what the spiritual development is of these Lamas, what kind of bodhisattvas they are. I suppose it's outrageous for me to say that I even believe that about the Dalai Lama, that he can do these things. Except I've had lots of personal meetings with him, and as far as I'm concerned, he's incomprehensibly holy. So I totally believe it. And I don't think that that's an arrogant statement to make. But that's just sort of my view. So did that get it, Lewis? Did that get your question sort of answered, or does it lead to more questions, or what?
Well, it leads to a lot of thought and contemplation, and
Okay.
that's always a good thing. So
Okay, but they're not totally formed. All right. So okay, well, since we've taken a break at this point, and it might take me a little while to get back to even thinking about what it was that I was trying to talk about. Are there more thoughts or questions that have sort of come up at this point? No hands raised. Nobody wants to unmute their mic and jump in. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I think I did watch that initiation that you're speaking about. It was on Zoom. I think it was about this time last year, or a little bit earlier, and I definitely felt what you're talking about. That he was, I don't know, I almost felt like I was taking a walk with him. So, and when you talk about how incomprehensibly holy he is, I definitely felt that. So,
It actually answers the sort of uncertainty that that I was expressing. Who was it that was speaking? I couldn't tell.
oh, it's Lorraine. I'm sorry my video's not on. I've not been feeling well for a couple of days and I might have COVID, so
Ooh,
I look about as well as I feel.
well, I certainly understand why your video's not on. And I hope you don't have COVID. But thank you
Thank
for
you.
contributing that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear it, I guess, actually, when you say that. Okay, so I remember where it was that I was going with what I was going to say. But before I do that, I want to go back to this second paragraph here. I'm not really going to talk about this right at the moment, but next week we will talk about this, and I'll have some more passages to look at. So that's sort of where we're going. But what I do want to talk about is that you must see that there is an obvious problem. Well, no, that's not good language. You must see that there's potential for problems here with how one relates to the Lama, how one relates to the Guru. If you actually do read this whole book on making your life meaningful, Lama Zopa has really extensive comments on what he calls Guru Yoga, the practice of relationship with the Guru. I say what he calls Guru Yoga because he actually says something here at the very end. When you see them with devotion as one, you have transformed your mind into Guru Yoga mind. When he is talking about Guru devotion, he's talking about something a little bit different. He's talking about more of you and the Guru are two separate beings, and what is your relationship with the Guru? And so here's the obvious problem, as I see it, as a problem, as a danger. Let me phrase it that way. There is this person who you're encountering, who is the Lama, who's the Guru, who's an ordinary person with ordinary human problems. I mean, Lama Zopa talks about it in this passage. He says they appear to you, and they appear in this form partly because your mind is obscure, but also they appear in ordinary form, which means they're appearing warts and all, to use that kind of language. I'm not saying the Lama has warts. I'm just saying, an ordinary person is there in front of you with their foibles. Maybe that's a better way to phrase it. And yet at the same time, the way you practice in relationship to them is to understand that the essential mind of that person is like the mind of a Buddha. No, I take that back. The essential mind of that Lama is not like the mind of a Buddha. It is the mind of a Buddha. Okay. So when I practice Guru Yoga with, say, Locho Rinpoche, I was with a person with bad knees who had his own little foibles. There were certain things that he loved momos. He did not like vegetarian momos. He wanted momos that were made of cows. Probably he would have preferred yaks, actually. And when he ate momos, there was always grease running down his mouth. I mean, he really got into it, Okay, so there's the ordinary person in front of me, and I'm sitting there with him. And I'm remembering that the essential nature of this appearing ordinary person is a Buddha. Okay, so that can be a little bit problematic in itself, but you can work with that. It's like, okay, I don't see a Buddha in front of me, even though I know there's a Buddha in front of me. That's my problem because of the obscurations of my mind. And every once in a while, he would do or say something that made it clear what he really was, which I couldn't even comprehend. But I'll say, okay, fine. He had that nature manifest because it was beyond my mind to see what it really was, except by some intellectual understanding. What if he made a really big mistake that really hurt me in some way? Because he's an ordinary person. So as Lama Zopa says, it's quite possible for him to make mistakes. And he probably will make mistakes because he's a Buddha in an ordinary body. And what if that hurts me in some way? Not like he's intentionally trying to hurt me, but for example, well, this is something that happened. I asked him for advice. He gave me the advice. It was a disaster. From my point of view, it was what he told me to do was a huge mistake that had really negative consequences for me. And that challenged my relationship with him, which otherwise is one of a profound devotion. I can't even express what that devotion was in relationship to him. There's no way to do that. And so that was a challenge for me. It was a challenge for years to come to terms with the fact that what it was in fact what it was, which was that here's this person with this extraordinary spiritual insight who gave me advice, which I took, which I thought was detrimental to my life. Now, I've talked with other people about this, and they said things like, well, how do you know it was detrimental? You don't know what would have happened if you didn't take his advice. This is called the null hypothesis in philosophy. He said to go such and such a place and do such and such a thing. So I did, and it seemed to not work out very well. Well, what if I hadn't done that? Maybe I would have been in an auto accident in the place that I was originally because I didn't take his advice to leave and was maimed or killed, right? So that's quite possible. Maybe he has the insight to look into the future or to look into that situation and see a danger and that in fact I should split, I should leave. And as difficult as things may have been for me by having followed that advice, they may have been horrifically more difficult if I didn't follow that advice. And I'll never know the answer to that question. So I had to come to terms with that. So I'm sharing this story because of two things. One is that if you do forge a relationship with a Lama to give you guidance, it seems to me that almost inevitably something like this will happen. It's not a necessity. It's not inevitable. I didn't have that problem with Taratsilka, who was my first Lama. Unfortunately, he gave me advice that I didn't follow and should have. But he didn't give me advice to follow that I did and that it didn't work out. So that experience I didn't have with him, right? So it's not necessary that you'll have this kind of experience, but there's every possibility that you can. And of course, we know many stories of teachers who abuse students in various ways. Sexual abuse, there are many scandals, we know of many scandals, where female students said, well, this is the teacher. He knows best. I'll do what he says to do. And then they end up being abused. So that's terrible, right? So they have to use their own judgment in every given situation and say, am I going to follow this advice or am I not going to follow this advice? There may be a Buddha inside of this ordinary looking person, but does that mean that everything they say to me is an expression of omniscient wisdom? So this is a conundrum. And Lama Zopa is opening us to this conundrum. He's very explicit about recognizing the distinction between the absolute and the conventional guru. But if you read farther in the book, as he starts talking about guru devotion, it starts sounding like basically one has to be okay with everything the guru does and serve the guru in ways that are not ways that come naturally to us as Westerners. Maybe they come naturally to Tibetans, but they certainly don't come naturally to Westerners. So there's some dicey issues in here. Essentially, when one practices guru yoga, one is practicing devotion to the absolute guru, not the conventional guru. You may serve the conventional guru because there's a body there, but your true devotion is to the absolute guru. But as Lama Zopa is telling us, it's complicated because the only way you see what you take to be the absolute guru is through the body of the conventional teacher. So in the past, I've talked a little bit more about this with different audiences. So I'm gonna share another example out of my own practice, out of my own life, which you may have heard before, you may not have, and hopefully it's useful. This relates to, actually, it goes back to this whole issue of His Holiness doing initiations over the internet. And I think that may be the only time he's ever done that. I don't know how frequently he's done it. He may have done it more often. How do we get a sense of what is this Dharmakaya, this Buddha mind, this wisdom mind, which is so important, which is what we're, as practitioners, presumably seeking to experience, to achieve. And I want to come back to this. What are we doing as practitioners before I end tonight's class? Hopefully I didn't just lose track of what I was wanting to say, which I think I may have. Hold on. Colin is smiling at me because he knows this happens. Okay. In the practice of Tantra, what we're seeking to do is to manifest this omniscient mind. And it's said that all the practices we get, where we visualize ourselves as a deity, or we do devotional practices or anything else. Whoops, we just lost the screen share. Well, that's okay. I can get it back if I need it. All the practices we're doing are dependent upon the relationship to the teacher. And that relationship is one in which there's a kind of transmission of the energy of the teacher's realization to us. Sorry, we couldn't see you. So why do you want to see me? All right. So I can't see me. Maybe that doesn't matter. Okay, there I am. Now I can see me too. Where was I? Yes. So the teacher, through the process of initiation, transmits a kind of energy that's associated with the thoughts and the realization that he has to us in the process of initiation. And I've likened that to the way in which we create yogurt, right? So you know that the way in which you can create yogurt is you have to have some yogurt starter from a previous batch of yogurt. You mix that with the warm milk, you let it sit, and the warm milk turns into yogurt. If you don't have the yogurt starter from another batch of yogurt, you can't make yogurt. You've got to have those bacteria. That's the way it works. So I think of the Lama and the initiation process as the transmission of the yogurt starter into us. And then we get to turn into yogurt, like the Lama is yogurt, to use that metaphor. That being the case, if you're practicing Guru Yoga, then what you do in your devotional practice is you look for that implicit yogurt within yourself. And the easiest way to find it is to see it in the form of your teacher. So this sounds repetitive, but suppose your teacher's not around. My lamas are all dead. Well, they have new bodies. So that the former bodies of my lamas are gone. All right. So when I practice, I remember them. So I remember being with Locho Rinpoche in a certain situation. I remember his presence. I remember what he looks like. And when I do that, it's like I can feel him. And if I can feel him, the conventional him, then I can reach into that conventional him, as it were, and touch the absolute guru that's within him. And if I can do that, then I can feel the same thing unfolding within myself. Because if I can find it in my memory of him, I can find it in myself. So I've found this to be a very powerful process. And I want to share it with you because Lama Zopa is a guru. He's a guru to many people. So if you're really deeply engaged in the FPMT and you see him as your initiating guru, how do you practice with him? It's not like he comes to Santa Fe very often if you live in Santa Fe or around here or wherever you happen to be. But he's still where he is. And you can still feel connected with him through your memories of that relationship of being with him, being in the same room with him. Even if you were one of 300 students, you can still reach into that memory and touch him. And in that way, touch the absolute guru and get a glimpse of what that is within yourself. So this is what he's talking about in this passage. I'm expressing it in some greater degree of detail, how to work with the various concepts that he's talking about here. But it really is what he's talking about. And by the way, as he says, therefore, this ordinary aspect, which shows delusion and suffering, is very precious, very important, because it is through manifesting in this form that all the Buddhas guide us. But I would say that in addition to that, it's very precious because in this form, we can have a doorway into that absolute nature, which is there within these teachers. Nobody has anything to say in relationship to that? Nothing whatsoever? I mean, I was just preaching my brains out. Okay. I was very passionate of it. Well, I feel that very passionately, so what the heck. My practice is based on devotion to my teachers, 100%. And they've been extraordinarily kind. Pam.
Jabin? Oh,
Okay, well, Pam was up first and then Nancy after that. How's that? Okay. Okay, yeah, Pam.
Thank you. Hi, thank you so much for your teachings. I appreciate it very much. So I'm fairly new to practice. I really actually am basically celebrating my 1 year today.
Happy birthday.
Well, thank you. But my question is, I don't really feel like I have a teacher yet. I mean, I have people who have not in the profound sense of a lama, and I've had teachers. So, and I actually, when you were, I've been in the presence of the Dalai Lama. I was fortunate enough a while ago to be in Pittsburgh and he was there. It's been a long time, about 20 years, but anyway, so maybe more than that, 23 years. But anyway, so what do you, in that case, what do you do when you're just kind of beginning and you don't have a Lama?
Well, it kind of depends upon what you need the Lama for.
Okay.
All right. So in that particular case, my thought is one way to study the Buddha Dharma, Buddhism, the Buddha Dharma, of course, is to read books. And His Holiness has written lots of books. Or maybe more the case is that he's taught many classes and given many lectures that have been transcribed and turned into book form. So you can study those, and those are great things to study, because he's written across so many different subjects, just all subjects. In fact, I think the third class in this series is his book on the Heart Sutra, which is quite phenomenal. It's one of my favorite books. So you can study that way. The other thing is that you can watch video recordings of his teachings. And I find that those are really interesting because so much of his personality comes through the video recordings. It's like watching Zooms. Now, if you're watching his teaching on Zoom, you have the benefit of listening to simultaneous translation. His Holiness is teaching, and simultaneously there's translation going on. That drives me a little bit crazy, actually, because the simultaneous translator has an unbelievably difficult job. I mean, he sort of maybe sometimes knows what His Holiness is going to say, but can't always be sure. So he has to translate while His Holiness is talking. And Tibetan sentence structure is completely different than English. You know, verbs are in different places. You don't know where the words are going to show up. You can't be entirely sure what he's going to be referring to. All right. But a lot of the earlier teachings were not done with simultaneous translation. When His Holiness was younger, one of the ways he would teach is he would talk for a while, and the translator would make a lot of notes furiously, and then His Holiness would stop, and then the translator would repeat back in English, you know, what His Holiness had said in Tibetan. And it's actually a much more precise way of conveying the information. So I actually recommend those kinds of video recordings over the simultaneous translations. Now, I've had friends who say that kind of drives them crazy because they're listening to His Holiness in Tibetan. They have no idea what he's saying. Gosh, this is boring. And then finally, you know, the translator comes in. And in the past, His Holiness would talk for 5 minutes, you know, and then finally the translation would come. And as I said to a friend of mine, we were at an initiation together when this was happening. I said to a friend of mine, listen to his voice. He speaks the most elegant, refined Tibetan of anybody ever. It's beautiful. And because he's a bodhisattva, every word that comes out of his mouth is mantra. It resonates mantra. So you can listen to Avalokiteshvara singing in a language you don't know. And it's very beautiful. And then you can turn your rational mind on to listen to the interpretation of what he was doing. And that's a great way to learn. And one of the other benefits that I find of that is it establishes your relationship with him in a certain kind of way. Because, look, here we are, presumably, we're making this assumption that we're live together on the internet, and you're looking at me and you see this person, David, you know, and you hear these words. And in your mind, you construct this sense of this person, David, that's communicating to you. That's the way it works, right? That's how we do Zooms together. you suspend reality and construct a David who you presume to have, who you presume has reality. The reality is that there's a flat screen in front of you with a bunch of little dots that are illuminating. That's all that's there. And your mind is putting together this image of a person who's associated with these sounds. But the reality is there's nobody there, right? But your mind is very good at creating a David, even though you've never met David. Well, you've met the Dalai Lama at a distance. So when you look at him on your computer monitor, your mind is creating a him. Well, there's some real profundity to that, which is to say that your mind is making him in your mind. He's in your mind. I know it sounds weird. You can think about that one for a little while. It works for me. I'll leave it at that. Does that answer your question, Pam, pretty much?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very
Okay.
helpful. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
I'm glad to hear it's helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, so Nancy, what was on your mind?
I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the difference between a teacher and your guru. All the teachings we go to, or if there's a teacher, is that your guru or whatever?
Okay, that's a really great question. Kay and I took a lot of teachings from Loche Rinpoche when we were in Dharamsala. We were really very fortunate in that respect. Sometimes it was just he, the translator, Kay, myself, and a friend of ours sitting in the room together. And he would be doing various explanations of things, practices that we were doing that he would explain to us. He wasn't our Lama. At that point, he was a teacher. After a number of years, we met him in California, and he was visiting a student of his or a disciple of his. At that point, I don't know which she was. And we went down to see him again. And we sat down with him, and it took him a little while to remember us, but he did. And then Kay said, Rinpoche, would you be our Lama? And I kind of went, because there's a very complicated relationship between the Lama and the disciple with all kinds of obligations. Now, in the tradition, you're supposed to wait a long time and check out all these people that could be your Lama until you find one that you think is trustworthy enough and has all the qualifications of a Lama. And those are written out. But I think the essential qualification is integrity and realization. I guess those are two essential qualities. Okay. She said, would you be our Lama? She didn't say, would you be my Lama? Fortunately, actually. She said, would you be our Lama? And he looked at us and he said, yeah, okay, I will. Okay, now he's no longer a teacher and we're no longer students. He's our Lama and we're disciples. But that means our relationship with him is very different. We have very different obligations to him. And he has very different obligations to us. I don't think that he was just sort of offhandedly saying, yeah, sure, I'll be your Lama, what the heck. I think that something else was going on, which I couldn't recognize what it was. But then he sort of decided it was going to be good, that was okay. He could have just as easily said no. It's possible to take an initiation from a Lama. You could be a student taking an initiation from a Lama. And now you have a very special and complicated relationship with that teacher who may or may not be your Lama, but it changes your relationship in ways I guess I would have to say I don't fully understand, actually. my first Lama was Tara Rinpoche. The first time I asked him to teach me to meditate Manju Shri, he refused to do it. He said no. And I'd been watching a lot of television series, Kung Fu, and I thought, oh, you're supposed to ask 3 times and then they'll give you what you want, right? So I asked him 3 times and he said no 3 times. He said he absolutely refused to teach me to meditate Manju Shri. And I thought,
I think he wasn't watching Kung Fu. That was the problem.
he loves samurai movies, so it's quite, who knows? But anyway, so I was really kind of distressed at that, but that was it. He was, but on the other hand, I took classes from him 1 or 2 times a day, 6 days a week for 8 months on all kinds of things, but he would not teach me meditation. We go grocery shopping together. I mean, he wouldn't teach me to meditate. And then some years later, when I saw him, he said, by the way, well, he didn't say by the way, he said, my next tour to the United States, I'm going to be teaching Yamataka practice. And why don't you come and I'll initiate you. Oh, okay. So I didn't even ask because I figured, why would I ask? He's always said no in the past, right? So I did. And that's when he became my Lama in that more formal sense. I couldn't possibly explain why it happened the way it happened, what was going on and why that happened. Before he died, he said, don't just take any other teacher as an initiating Lama. Be very cautious about who you receive initiations from. Be sure they're very qualified. And remember that you would have a relationship with them that has very special characteristics. So be very discriminating. Excuse me. So we were very cautious. We took his advice. So what it boils down to is checking people out and checking out their integrity and their realizations, and then becoming their disciple. You can formally ask them, I would like to be your disciple. Or just take the initiation, and then in a way you are their disciple. It's complicated. It's hard for Westerners. We don't have this tradition in our culture, and so we don't have a full what would I say here? There's some things that Tibetans, I think, just take for granted because they know in their culture about some things that we don't understand and that we tend to learn the hard way. And I think relationships with lamas are one of those things that they kind of get, that it's in their culture about how it's going to work. And for us, it's complicated. So if I were going to offer any advice, you didn't exactly ask me for advice, but if I was going to offer any advice, I'd say err on the side of caution. Don't err on the side of being Pollyanna. Anyway, the bottom line is it's all a matter of karma when you get right down to it. In many cases, again, this is from the Tibetan point of view, the reason that you are going to have a relationship with a Lama in which you're his disciple or her disciple, let me get away from the sexist language. There's some great women Lamas around. English predisposes me still at my age to use that kind of language. I'm sorry. They would say that you had the relationship in the past, in past lives. So the reason that person is your Lama in this life is because they were their Lama in a past life. I mean, you would hear that. Mm-hmm. At one point, we asked Locha Rinpoche, why was he giving us all these teachings? He was giving us an immense amount of his time, and everybody wanted his time. It was amazing, and he was giving us a huge amount of time. He said, that's because we all practiced together in past lives. I mean, the way he saw it was he was just doing now what he'd been doing then. Actually, that makes the most amount of sense. But then, of course, you have to believe in former and future lives, whatever that means. But that adds another dimension to it, right? If you take someone on as a Lama and you do believe in former and future lives, you may be with them again in the future. Is that a good thing? Do you want to do that? I can think of lots of people I never want to see again in eternity. Unfortunately, that does not include my Lamas. Okay, how are we doing here? Did that work for you, Nancy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Because I'm about to lose my voice. And so that's going to be sort of the end of this game for me. So there's another hand up. Whose hand is that?
It's me, Lorraine.
Lorraine. Okay. Yeah, Lorraine. Well, thank you for catching that, Nancy.
It's all right. So it's funny because you kind of touched on just now a lot of things that I had questions about, but I did want to mention the Dalai Lama does have a website and he goes live pretty frequently, actually. And sometimes those talks are in English. And I think there might be a way on the website to listen to him without a translator. But I try to always catch him when he goes live. I guess I'm kind of a fangirl. I love his approach to science and all that. So, but I'm kind of in the same position as Pam, where I'm basically new to Buddhism. I'm very cautious. I've had some bad experiences in spirituality my entire life. You couldn't pay me to walk into a church at this point. And so I've at this point, I've kind of accepted that people are going to be people. There's going to be drama wherever you go. But so far, Buddhism has made more sense to me than anything else. There's a lot of things that just click a lot better. But I'm very cautious about the human aspect. I know everyone gets caught up in their lives, and so do I, and makes assumptions, and so do I. But I just had some bad experiences. So there was a Buddhist center that I was going to over a year ago, and something happened that just rubbed me the wrong way, and I just left. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just stopped going, and I probably hurt some people. I don't know, but it felt so wrong at that point. So I was just wondering if you had anything to offer on a situation like that.
I do, and I'll approach it on several different levels. A teacher that I knew once said, if you don't want to be trashed, don't be a trash can. So he was talking to me about an issue that I had. I'm not talking about you, but as a general principle, I think we have to be cautious on a number of levels. And I see, Colin, that your hand is up, but I'll catch you in a little bit. We have to be cautious on several levels. I think from the story you tell me, it sounds like what you're doing was the right thing. I mean, I can't judge these things, but it sounds like you're taking care of yourself and you're going the safe route. The safe route is always a safe route, you know. But I would add another dimension to all of this. And I'll do it in the form of a metaphor. So maybe you can think about this. So there's the founder of San Francisco Zen Center was someone called Suzuki Roshi. He was one of the earliest Zen teachers in the United States. And he founded a residential center, not because he intended to, but because the students around him wanted to have a residential center. They wanted to live in one place together where they could all practice and devote themselves to Zen practice. So he organized things in such a way to make that possible. And that's where San Francisco Zen Center came from, sort of the flagship Zen Buddhist center in the United States, really. But when people live together, they're always having issues. I don't know what kind of things that you had with, the church that you went to. But when people live together, they have issues. I mean, husbands and wives have issues. Imagine, I don't know, 40 former hippies living together in a building in San Francisco, practicing Zen and trying to make everything work. There are going to be issues. I mean, I hate you, I love you, I'm attracted to you, I'm repelled by you. It's like, you're not pulling your weight here. I'm working really hard, and you're slacking off. You go through the whole thing, right? And there are all kinds of judgmental issues that are going on between people and so on and so forth. I'm a victim of this, and you were aggressive about that, and I'm being exploited, and I'm not being appreciated, and you can go down the list. So all that stuff is coming up among these 40 hippies that are all living together, trying to practice Zen, not even knowing exactly what they're doing. There's been no experience. There were no guidebooks. There hadn't been anything like this existing in the United States before. And Suzuki Roshi said, one of the ways that you clean potatoes is you put them in the wash water and you rub all the potatoes together. And as the potatoes rub against each other, the dirt gets scraped off, right? One potato scrapes the dirt off of another potato. And that's one of the ways you get the dirt off the potatoes. So here are these 40 potatoes rattling around in this building, scraping the dirt off of each other, is what he was saying. That they could look at all the difficulties that were coming up and see them as an opportunity for practice. Why do I feel that this other person is not pulling their weight, that I'm working really hard and they're only working 70%? Where does that come from? Why is it that I only can do this much work and other people are doing more work? What's wrong with me? Well, there's something to be learned from these things. So one place that could lead is you work yourself down to a nub, you work yourself out. You just, you don't take care of yourself because of community expectations. That's not what he was talking about. He was talking about learning from the experience. So what is it in any given experience that's provoked in a Dharma context? What is it about any given experience that might be something I can learn about? Not be a trash can, not be exploited, not be harmed, but what can I learn from what is going on here? What can I learn about myself? And then do I want to do anything about that? Or maybe not, I don't know. So that's just another way to think about it. So my friend who told me not to be a trash can provoked me to think about why it was that I was allowing myself to be trashed by this person, and had been throughout my life, trashed by this person. It was my father, actually. Why did I feel that way? Why did I allow that to happen? It was a new way of looking at things. It helped me see things from a new perspective, which helped me extract myself from unwholesome aspects of that relationship, at least a little bit. Is that helpful, Lorraine? I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just suggesting another way to look at the situation.
Yes, I'm still kind of hashing through some things that are still, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's a long, complicated process, I guess.
Okay. Well, we don't know each other. There's no reason to get real personal about this either. I just wanted to, I guess actually for the benefit of everybody that's here, to make a comment about that, not even perhaps specifically for you. Is
Yes,
that okay? Are we all right?
yes, thank you so much.
Okay, I didn't want to put you on the spot with that. Maybe I did. I'm sorry if I did.
You're all right.
Okay, good. So I certainly didn't intend to. Colin, what's up? You must be, Colin, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I guess I have kind of a similar question as some of the previous ones, but maybe just to take it a little farther. So I guess one of my hangups in deepening my practice has been my resistance to kind of submitting myself to the authority of someone, being like almost pathologically anti-authoritarian and anti-hierarchical, and so when I read like the passage that we were looking at, it's very easy for me to look at that language and say that the like Dharma exists everywhere, right? So you can sort of like delineate between like a Sat guru or I guess it's more of like a expressly sort of like Hindu thing, but like Upaguru, the capacity for insight exists in everything, right? And that's part of the nature of interdependence. So is there any sort of essential need to seek out like an individual who, while like their karma may give them the capacity to like transmit greater insight, is there anything more inherently valuable in seeking out that source than finding the dharmic insight that exists in all of existence surrounding me at any given time?
You don't need a guru.
Sure. Yeah, because everything is guru, right?
If you can see it,
Yeah,
that's the problem.
sure.
I mean, yeah, you don't need a guru. I mean, unless you want to practice Vajrayana Tantra, then you do need a guru, because you have to have the transmission. You got to get the yogurt starter. It's a specific type of path. It doesn't mean it's the only way to get to the wisdom mind. It's a specific way to get to the wisdom mind. So if you don't want to do it that way, there are other ways to do it. So there are all kinds of streams of Buddhist tradition, just to stay within Buddhism. And some of them are the Vajrayana, Tantrayana stream, and some are not. And I mean, there have been great masters and greatly realized practitioners in all of these different streams. I mean, it would be insane for me to say, there haven't been any Theravada Buddhists who've achieved any kind of realization. I mean, how can anybody say such a thing as that? That would be nuts, right? And they don't exactly have the same kind of tradition. To understand what their tradition is, though, would be difficult, because you would have to separate culture out from Buddhism, which is perhaps hopeless to do that. I'm not sure how you would do that. But yeah, everything can teach you, and everyone can teach you. The only other thing that I would add to this, well, maybe not the only thing that I would add, but the only thing that comes to my mind at the moment that I would add to this is sometimes you need, I don't like that. Sometimes it's really very helpful to have someone tell you something you don't want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're only looking at, if you're looking into the world for teachings, you're going to be seeing what you want to see. I think that's inevitable for all of us. You know, it's sort of like my metaphor of constructing the David out of the pixels, right? You're going to see what you want to see. I mean, you expect to see David, you construct a David. You don't expect to see my wife, Kay. Right? And I suppose even if she showed up, you might not even notice her because you're so busy. There's only David there. I don't know. I'm getting sidetracked. The point is that that in general, we want to stay in our comfort zone for everything, including philosophy, right? So we study what we want to study. We learn what we want to learn. We don't tend to want to learn something we don't know about or that we don't want to have to learn unless somebody forces us to do it. I mean, it's like the kid in the music lesson. You know, it's like, Mom, I really don't want to play the piano. You'll be so happy in 10 years that you learn to play the piano. Sit down and play the piano now. I want to go out and play baseball. Play the piano. I don't care about 10 years from now. Play the piano, right? So, I mean, that's the discipline that can be imposed on us, which is sometimes really useful, even though we don't like it. So one of the things about a good teacher is every once in a while they whack you over the head and they tell you things you really didn't want to hear. And who else would do it? I mean, Locha Rinpoche used to beat us up once in a while. I mean, not physically. They used to say things to us that would just like stunned us. That's stuff about ourselves, right? That completely stunned us. And a friend of ours said, wow, he must love you a lot because he never says stuff like that to me. And another friend then said, if he told you that stuff, you would run away. David's not going to run away. So he's going to hear stuff that he doesn't want to hear. And it was immensely valuable, the stuff that he said that shocked the crap out of me. Unbelievably valuable. You know? I'm not saying everybody's going to want to do that sort of thing. So I'm just saying that this is one of the benefits. It's like when you sign up for a class. Here's a better metaphor. We'll depersonalize it. You sign up for Introduction to Asian Philosophy taught by this Komito dude that you don't know who the heck he is. And you get to this section on Taoism, which has never interested you in the slightest. And you learn something really interesting, like, wow, that was pretty interesting what I just learned. I would have never paid attention to that if I hadn't been forced to read that assignment. Probably on pain of, if I don't read the assignment, I'm not going to pass the exam. I mean, that's often the way the classes are constructed. Right? Or you have to write this philosophy paper on this subject, which you really don't want to deal with, but you have to do it. Right? So that's going to force you to think about something in a way that you maybe don't want to do it. But there it is, then it's helpful. And if you hadn't signed up for the class, that would have never happened. So, you know, you sign up for the Lama, and every once in a while you get your butt kicked. You probably needed it. Or, you know, you're told to discipline yourself when you don't really want to. I don't know, I'm kidding. Maybe these are bad examples. You get the idea though, right? Even if they're not good examples. You do get the idea, don't you, Colin?
Yeah, I do. I think and maybe this is just sort of like where I am in my path with it. I still, and I know that it's constantly stated in some way or another by so many people throughout like all of these various spiritual traditions that like reading it alone is not going to always sort of illuminate certain aspects of it. Like you're not always going to see the instantiation of this stuff in your own being, and that's kind of like what you're saying, the accountability quality of a teacher or a guru is sort of essential. But yeah, I still, I don't know. There's something about the idea of just like spending time with the philosophy of it that feels sufficient. And yeah, maybe that is like my own vanity and my unwillingness to like make myself sort of available to the authority to
Or,
submit.
or maybe it's just self-protection, or recognizing the nature of your character, that's what your path looks like. I'm not trying to be judgmental about this, but
Yeah.
I'm speaking from the point of view of the Vajrayana tradition. I mean, that's just the way that I do it,
Yeah.
because that's the tradition that I'm rooted in. But I don't think that, I mean, there were times in my life when I was not unlike you at all. Like, don't tell me what to do at that level. It's like I can get it out of the books. That's really all that I need. And for many years it worked for me. It's just that, at a certain point when I wanted something else, this was the route into it. And if I had wanted something different than that particular route, then, it would have been a different thing entirely. If I had gone down the Zen tradition, I mean, I've lived in Zen monasteries. I like Zen. If I'd gone down the Zen tradition, I could have practiced Zen all my life without having that relationship with that kind of teacher. You can do that. I mean, there are lots of people at San Francisco Zen Center that practice, and they don't have a particular relationship with the teacher that is like this special type. They do see teachers and get advice on their practice. And the teacher might say, well, don't do it this way, do it that way. But, take their advice or not, it doesn't really make any difference. That's not the kind of relationship that exists. But that wasn't my particular path. My particular path was different. And then your particular path is different. And so, and if it needs to change, then I'm sure, because, well, you're a smart guy, but also I trust that people know these things, that if things change and they feel like they need something different, they'll know that they need something different, and then they'll do something about it. And, there are times for one thing and there are times for another thing. And when it's time to do the thing that it's time to do, that's the thing to do, not the other thing, whatever that is. You know what I mean, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Well,
I'm going around in circles again. God, I do that a lot. Go around in circles, repeat myself. Oh, life is amazing. Okay. Well, look at that. It's 8:28. We're sort of at the end of things here. So let me just sort of let me recap. This is kind of what I want to do. Is I'm going to take a passage. I'll do the same thing next week. I'll take a passage and I'll kind of riff on it. If I have my act together, which is unlikely, but if I have my act together, I'll ask somebody to post the passage in advance of our coming together. Otherwise, basically, I'll try to select shorter passages to screen share and read and then talk about. And I do hope we can continue more of this kind of back and forth. And what would be really great is if I could shut up and you folks would talk to each other some. You all have great experience and you know lots of stuff. You can answer each other's questions. Or you can get together and gang up on each other. We could have debates, like, we'll get everybody on one side who believes one thing, and we'll get everybody on another side who believes another thing, and we'll debate. No, that's never going to happen. It's not the way it works in the United States. We don't do stuff like that. But having this be dialogic is great. I mean, not just because you have questions, but also because you have experience. And I'll try and be as delicate as I can with your experience. I feel like I perhaps wasn't delicate enough with Lorraine's experience, but I just wanted to put out another side of ways of looking at it, because sometimes I found myself in situations that I thought I could have learned a lot more from, without there being danger in it. If there's danger in it, then it's always safe to not touch the hot flame. It's always safest not to touch the flame.
I do really appreciate your input. I think you did just fine. I actually have this issue with people being too delicate and kind of tiptoeing around things. And like you mentioned, that sometimes you need to hear things that are harsh, and I'm right there with you. I really wish people would stop. In some cases, you do need to be sensitive about someone's experience if was a truly traumatic experience, and I have had those. But at the same time, there's far more instances where people need to be honest, and they can be honest and be cognizant of another person's mindset at the same time without hurting that person and just being honest. And there's not enough of that, I really feel. So that's where I'm at. There's been a couple of times where I wish people would tell me what's really on their mind, and they won't tell me. And times when I would try to get someone to open up and tell them, and I tell them, where I'm coming from, and that made them shut down instead of opening up. And it's honestly very frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. Well, part of the deal for me in teaching this way is, for one thing, I can't see you, but even if I could see you, I'm not in your presence. And it's the nature of human beings that there is vast amount of communication that is not through the eyeballs or for the ears. You know what I mean when I say this. So then it becomes very difficult to know the best way to be in honest, sensitive, and caring communication and relationship with another person. And delicate and honest at the same time is a challenge. So you need a lot of feedback to ride that bicycle and not fall over, as it were. Bicycle riding is, first you fall to the left, then you fall to the right, then you fall to the left, then you fall to the right. And you do it frequently enough and fast enough, you call it balance. And that's how you ride a bicycle. But you got to get a lot of feedback out of the environment to do it properly, where you get a lot of skin knees. So thank you for coming back in and telling me that, and sort of reassuring me that I didn't blow it, because I do worry about that sort of thing. All right, good. All right, thank you all for coming. And I don't do formal dedications. This is not that kind of class. I appreciate you being here. I don't get to talk about the Dharma unless there's somebody who wants to listen to it. So thank you for giving me the opportunity by being here. And I look forward to being here a week from now with whoever else chooses to show up. These things are going to be recorded and posted, so you can always catch it that way at your leisure, and however that works for you. I was making pasta this evening and reviewing my notes in between stirring the pasta. There are all kinds of ways to do things that are kind of interesting when we have the freedom to do it. And the pasta came out all right too. All right, again, see you in a week if I see you in a week. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. All right, good night. Have a good week. Have a good year. It's the first day of the year.